introducing the complete Essiac Essentials Centennial Edition, 1922 to 2022. I'm Klein. This book is the final updated edition of all the work that Sheila, Snow, and I have basically ever done concerning Essiac. It's been quite a ride. Our collaboration began in 1997 when, after visiting Sheila and Mike and Mary at Bracebridge, I took home a couple of copies of Sheila's Essence of Essiac. It was her first book and at the time the most definitive book about Essiac. And it had sold very well. It had been published in 1993 and the sales were beginning to just level off, and I suggested taking a couple of copies back to England and then sending them to some publishers and seeing if, with the idea of them republishing and maybe updating the Essence of Essiac. I got an answer from Gateway Books. It was an established publishing house to do with healing and various subjects to do with natural medicine.
Was that in England?
Yeah, that was in Bath. That's Debbie Jakovac prompting me.
I'm not in England.
Yeah, that was in England. And Alec Bartholomew came back to me and he was very enthusiastic about the idea of an Essiac book, but he suggested that Sheila and I collaborate to produce a completely new book, and asked me to ask Sheila what I thought about that. He knew that we could both write. We'd both been published, and so I approached her, and she was equally enthusiastic. Well, why not? Let's do this. So in the summer of 1998, I went back to Canada, back to her home near Bracebridge, Ontario, and with my computer. And we were 3.5 weeks together, and basically we wrote what would have become Essiac Essentials in 3.5 weeks. At the time, I didn't know that the house where I was staying, Sheila's house, was absolutely full of historic papers about Essiac. I had no idea. She hadn't told me that she actually had all these papers. I knew she had a lot of material, but I didn't really think about what it actually was. So while we were writing Essiac Essentials, she started to bring out various papers for reference. And it introduced me to this collection of work. And I began to realize there was a lot more than I'd ever thought possible just in that one house. So we finished the book and I took it back to England. And then by sheer good luck, Alec Bartholomew decided to retire. And he offered his current titles to Gillan Macmillan in Ireland, which was a well-established publishing house of 150 years. So then I fell under the spell of Michael Gill, who was the CEO of Gillan Macmillan, and basically he became my mentor, whether he realised it or not. He taught me everything I was ever know about publishing, and under his guidance, then Essiac Essentials became something that Sheila and I really were proud of and wanted to actually put out on the market. It had had a slightly sort of rocky ride before then, not with our writing, but the first publishing house had wanted to change some of the information, and Sheila and I went wild about that, I'll be honest. So I got the opportunity to put the whole lot back together as we wanted, and then Essiac Essentials came out in 1999. Gosh, how long ago is that? Yeah, really.
22 years.
Yeah, it's a long time back, yes.
23 years.
So it came out, and then 9 months later, It came out in America with Kensington Publishing Corporation, and both editions were selling well. And I suggested to Michael Gill that we do a second book because I knew there was a lot more material, and he agreed. So this was how Essiac, The Secrets of Rene Caisse's Herbal Pharmacy came about. Essiac Essentials was always meant as a kind of handbook. Essiac Secrets was meant more as a reference book. It would delve more deeply into what Essiac was about, and it was meant to be something for students and people who were quite serious about producing Essiac. And they both sold well. Then in 2005, Sheila became ill, and Mike got worried about having so much archive in the house. They'd moved house by then, and the archive was like distributed around their new house in a much more haphazard fashion because it'd been a lot of work moving. And he asked me if I would come to Canada in November 2005 and start to collate the archive with the idea of taking as much of it away as I could and to maybe bring out another book. He was worried that there was a lot of information that hadn't been put out into circulation. And so I went to Canada. I was 2 weeks there in November 2005 and returned with a bulging bag full of papers. And that was my first real chance to sit down and go through the papers extensively by myself to give them time. Also, I'd found a collection of taped telephone calls, which I hadn't actually heard. Sheila had referred to them when talking to me, but I'd never actually heard these calls. And then it took me 6 weeks to actually go through and listen to all these calls, and the images in my mind that these calls left of what happened in 1977 when Essiac hit the headlines, when the Homemakers magazine article came out. I mean, it was really quite dramatically different to how it had been portrayed in other books. So I could see what Mike meant. And then this was the basis for the Essiac book that came out in 2006. And then I thought that I'd done enough, really. I had other projects going. But in 2010, my son, Gabriel, who was selling the Essiac book, he was contacted by Debbie Jakovac and her business partner in America, and my son suggested that I talk to Debbie. He said, I think, you will get on with this lady. So our communication started in March.
17th,
That's it.
2009.
No, 2010. It was March 2010. Yeah, it was. I remember that well. And from there came a suggestion from Debbie and her business partner that I write yet another Essiac book, bringing together the information from all the others, but updating it because obviously I was still experimenting with the various formulae according to what I'd read in the archive. I'd also gone back to Canada and retrieved the rest of the papers. So I had literally the full archive in the house by the end of 2010. So I thought about it and I thought, well, yeah, I can do that. I could see the point of it because I'd done so much extra work since then, and it was time to put out this compilation. Again, I thought it was the last one. So that came out at the in 2011, didn't it?
Yes, spring 11.
Yeah, that's it. And that sold well. And then Debbie and I decided that when she moved back to Montana, it might be quite a good idea to actually do some seminars. And these proved popular. And for 3 years, once a year, we did seminars in Montana in November, because I like working in November. That's just me. And the first seminar that we held in Missoula, Montana, a very, very tall Indian called Moke Eagle Feathers turned up with his friend. I mean, he was tall. And we just got on famously from the beginning, didn't we? And Moke was an amazing person. He was absolutely amazing person. And he had this incredible sense of humour that you had to be really on the ball with to survive. But he was also incredibly, his compassion was infinite. And he got very enthusiastic about the idea of the original 8-herb Native American formula, which is what I was working with by then, because I wanted to get past all the rhetoric that had occurred around Rene Caisse, especially after her death. I needed to go back to the source. So this is what I was working on, and this is what in the seminar I was promoting. And Moke really caught on to that. And then he came up to Paulson in Montana, where Debbie was living, and there was a famous day when we were all in a cafe in town. And he said to me, "You should write a book about this, about the original herbal formula." And I said, "Well, I can't write a book about a title." And so I said, "So what's it called? What's the name of the formula?" And he said, "Oh, don't worry about that." He said, "I've been talking to the old medicine man." He said, it's easy. It's black root medicine." And the way he said it was just this total conviction. And the look on his face, was just, there was no question. And I said, "I can work with that." And so in 2014, I produced black root medicine. And essentially, it was more back to the source. There was always a feeling with black root medicine when I was writing it. It was very much something that was off the grid. And also by then, of course, Debbie and I had started our famous trips to Yellowstone Park. And so there was very much the feeling of connection with the earth, and I'm a volcano freak, so all of that sort of got poured into the black root medicine book. And again, I thought I'd finished. I was always finishing, but I never quite finished. And then, of course, some people in Europe then wanted an Essiac handbook for Europe, and it had to be written in English first before it got translated into anything else. So I found myself writing yet another update, because I was still working with the formulae, and for myself, I was working with 100% sheep sorrel root. There were no leaves and stems since 2010 for me. So they felt that these people in Europe actually felt that they would really like to promote that. So it ended up with yet another English book, a handbook, Essiac Essentials Handbook, and it was translated into French and German and Spanish. And again, I thought I'd finished. But I had yet to completely collate the archive. It was a mammoth task. And quite honestly, I put it off for years. It was in 2 boxes, just crammed, very well packed papers, but there were so many. And I knew it was going to be a huge task. And it was only when I had the prospect of selling my house and not really having a base anymore by choice, that I realized I really had to do something with all these papers. It had to be done. So it took 5.5 months in 2019, I think. Yes, 2019. And I worked it out 6.25 days a week average. I just put my head down and got on with it. And it was a huge task. But of course it was worth doing. And when it was finished, I'd managed to make sense of this mishmash of papers. And I copied the whole archive onto, I think, 200 USB keys, flash keys, and just sent them off around the world and thought I'd finished with that. But it didn't quite work out. So then I found myself into a position where the only thing to do with all these papers was to put them onto a website so that everybody could then see the evidence for themselves. There was no question of claiming anything for Essiac. There were the papers, there were the historic case histories and some up-to-date case histories and all the information could possibly put on there. And I worked with Deborah Carey in England and we put the website together. So it became the Essiac Council. And then, of course, it occurred to me and to Debbie and quite a few others of us that 2022 was coming. And of course, that was 100 years since Rene Caisse had actually received the formula from Mrs. Johnson way back in Haileybury. So we had 100 years of Essiac. So then it made sense, finally, with all the updated work, to bring out one last, and it is the last, compilation of all the work. Everything is updated in line with the work that's been done by studying the archive. So the very last Sheila Snow, Marley Klein book is now ready to come off press at the end of, towards the fall.
October would be my guess for the month.
Yeah, for 2022. Obviously, we've had 2 years of pandemic. That's held up many things. It's also held up book publishing and all this kind of thing. But we're getting there. So this is my gift. That it is quite literally the last Essiac book because I no longer have a garden for experimentation and I'm getting old. I'm no longer that young thing that started off with Essiac after her husband died. And so I am satisfied that, like Sheila before me, I have now completed the mission. I will always be eternally grateful to Sheila Snow and Mary Macpherson for sharing their time with me and for trusting me to carry on with the work when they were gone. And as my own twilight years approach, I'll never see 70 again, then I'm satisfied that now with Debbie's work and the work of the Essiac Council and the young ones coming along behind, that my mission is now fulfilled and Essiac will go on because it has value. It helps people. It depends. It's different for everybody. It can never be claimed as a cure for cancer. I have never claimed that, ever. All I've done is present the facts. I know it's helped me. It helped my husband when he was desperately ill. It didn't cure him, but it helped his quality of life, markedly so. And I have never yet, in all my 28 years of working with Essiac, I've never come across any occasion when I would say that Essiac was not helpful to some degree to someone. And I can truthfully say that. The information is on the Essiac Council website, and it's for everyone to make.
Council.org.
That's right, essiaccouncil.org, as Debbie's just prompted me to say. It's there, and everyone can make up their own minds. There's no bias at all. The historic papers are there. You can make up your own minds. And I think that's good enough. And all I can say to everybody I've ever met or known in all these 28 years, then it's been an enriching experience. And I'm so glad to have known you and spoken to you and just interacted with you. I met so many wonderful people. And for me, that's good enough. So I wish you all well. When all other emotions have ceased, only love remains. Loved you all.